When Obama was elected, a lot of the media focused on the multicultural, how diverse the universe of people were that supported him and that voted for him and that put him into office. And I think those attacks show that there's still in this country a small minority of people that do not share the view that the United States is ready for an African American president and is ready for a fully diverse community where African Americans are playing a powerful role.
One of the big differences between children of color and white children is that, and again, these are all very broad generalizations, but economics and resources play a tremendous role. So, for example, a child who is convicted of a crime in a poor neighborhood in say somewhere in New York or somewhere in Florida or somewhere like that, they might not have the resources generally. If they're accused of a crime, they might not have the resources, number one, to afford an attorney, number two, to afford kind of the type of counseling, mental health counseling or drug counseling that a child of higher economic or socioeconomic status would be able to afford. And so those kind of inequalities, resource inequalities, lead to outcome inequalities as well.
NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the Legal Aid Society, and a law firm called Paul Weiss in New York City today filed a lawsuit against the New York City Police Department, the New York City in general, and the New York City Housing Authority, basically challenging the way that the NYPD has been enforcing trespass laws. What we have learned from talking to people that live in New York City housing and talking to our colleagues that are representing people who have been arrested, is that the NYPD has been arresting people and charging them with trespass, and that includes people who live in New York City housing buildings. So NYPD arrests people for trespassing in the building in which they live, people who are visiting friends or relatives that live in New York City housing. So, for example, if I go to visit my grandmother and I encounter a police officer, if for some reason, the police would basically stop me, say, where am I going? What am I doing there? I'd say, I'm going to visit my grandmother. And sometimes they would go check and see if my grandmother was home and she could verify that I was her granddaughter, but sometimes they don't. And if they, for example, go check and let's say she went to the laundry and she's not home, I'm getting arrested for trespassing, even though I have a lawful and appropriate reason for being in a New York City Housing Authority building. And so we filed a lawsuit against the city and the NYPD for that practice because people who have done nothing wrong have been arrested, and it's overwhelmingly African American and Latino people. Over 90% of the people who have been arrested for trespass in New York City are Black or Latino. Since 2004, there has been a 37% increase in the rate of trespass arrests just in housing authority buildings alone. There has been about 50% increase in trespass-related stops, meaning that there isn't, regardless of whether there's an arrest, just a police officer grabbing someone and stopping them and say, I think you're trespassing, what are you doing here? And so the rate of trespass arrests, in New York City Housing Authority buildings have gone through the roof, and that number is not related to crime rates or other factors, because we had all of that analyzed, so we know that those numbers do not, it's not supported by some attempt at controlling crime. It is some independent policy by the New York City Police Department. The NYPD has to follow the law. The law is that you don't stop anyone, you don't stop, hold someone unless you have, and this is the legal term, reasonable suspicion that they have committed a crime. If you are standing in the lobby of a building, walking in the lobby of a building, that is not reasonable suspicion of a crime. So you cannot stop someone for being in the lobby of a New York City Housing Authority building. We are challenging juvenile life without parole sentences, and that is children, 13 years old, 12 years old, 14 years old, who commit often one crime, and they are sentenced to life without parole. And that is, I'm talking about life without parole, meaning that 13-year-old will spend from 13 until 80, until the day he dies, in prison, and he will go home in a box. And 13-year-olds are sentenced to that. The overwhelming majority of the children who have received life without parole sentences are African American in this country, and that is because we believe African Americans are treated differently and viewed differently than white children. When a young black boy commits a crime, the data shows the government comes down far heavier on him than it does on a similarly situated white child, such that it is black children that are being sentenced to life without parole.
That is actually 100% true, considering what it's put me through personally. My older brother, he got a few years, and there was a trial right after about a Caucasian kid, as you said earlier. He actually got a few months in a mental institution, rehabilitation. It's just not right. Something has to be done about this.
Traditional theory is that you punish a child or you punish someone who's committed a crime. And now there's been kind of a greater shift to try and rehabilitate children and try and give them the kind of tools that they need once they get out of being incarcerated, or once they go through the juvenile justice system. Once they're through that they won't return to the system. So rather than kind of just locking them up and throwing away the key and not kind of dealing with all the other social problems that they might have, it's kind of really trying to address the range of the issues that may have helped them get into the system in the first place.
Sometimes they may treat a kid differently than others, such as they sometimes curse, and they may yell sometimes. They'll say with more authority than needed. And I remember once there was this little fight where one of the junior high schoolers kept cursing and everything, and getting up in their face, where they put them in handcuffs, and because they had to restrain them.
So you want to try and stop kids from being arrested for things that they shouldn't be arrested for. You want to try and change the dynamic in public schools, so that you don't have to have a huge army of school safety officers and metal detectors and all these kinds of things that are kind of helping feed kids into the juvenile justice system in the first place.
I do have security guards in my school. They don't really treat the boys unfairly. They actually hang out with a lot of the students. However, they do treat the females with a lot of disrespect, mostly African American and Latino. I feel that some of these guards should actually be kicked out. It's not really all their fault. The females don't really report them. Sometimes I feel like they just want it to happen to them. Sometimes they talk dirty to them. I refuse to give any examples right now, or they touch them inappropriately.
This nation was built on equal rights for all, and for another culture or race to get more time in jail than another race for the same crime or the same basically for the same crime, then I think it's definitely wrong. It's not right, and that's not what the nation was built on. So I think everyone should have equal rights